My name is Dr. Abyss, and everything you hear or read here must remain here. What I am about to recount no longer belongs to this world, but to a space-time where the laws of physics and morality are mere vestiges of what they once were. This is my final mission, one that goes beyond any scientific discovery, one that tested the limits of what I could tolerate, or at least what I believed I could understand. The Mars expedition was scheduled to be a routine mission, a simple exploration craft with a reduced crew heading toward the secret base of Purple Lagoon, the most advanced interplanetary organization responsible for the research and development of technologies for humanity. Although the public believed humanity was still in its early stages of space exploration, we had already mastered enough to consider such a mission a walk in the park. However, the journey to Mars became something much larger, something I never imagined, something that in the end would drag me to the abyss of the unknown. The Tethys, our spacecraft, launched from Earth's orbit with its crew of 6, myself included. We all knew the mission wasn't exactly routine, but none of us had the faintest idea of what was to come. It was a short journey, no more than 6 months to the underground base of Purple Lagoon on Mars, where we conducted tests on new technologies for the exploration of distant solar systems. Aboard the Tethys, communication was constant with Earth through satellites, transmitting seemingly harmless data, such as the conditions of the spacecraft and trajectory calculations. The tranquility of the trip was shattered, however, when an anomaly appeared in our communication line, a distortion in the quantum frequencies, something we had never encountered before. It was as though something was interfering directly with the signals. It was an external fault, no doubt, and it was from this moment that everything started to change. On the first night, while reviewing the data, I noticed an enigmatic transmission had been sent to us. At first, I thought it was a coded message from some colleague at Purple Lagoon, perhaps a secret instruction or a security test. But upon closer analysis, something was wrong. The message had no known origin, nor did it follow any human communication protocol or structure. It was a sequence of symbols and sounds, a combination of frequencies, though human, had an otherworldly quality. Something in me, a primitive impulse, felt the danger, but my desire to understand, to unravel the mystery, wouldn't let me back down. Anubis, I read, an ancient word connected to the Egyptians, tied to death and the afterlife. But for some reason, that name should not have been there. Not in a message from deep space. What was happening, and more importantly, who or what was trying to communicate with us? I called a meeting with the crew. Everyone was agitated, but few displayed the fear I felt. The commander, a veteran of space travel, was skeptical. It must be a communication error, he said, as if the distortions were just a technical glitch. But something in my gut told me it was not that. That night, I was awoken by a sound. It was not a mere noise, but something deeper, something reverberating within my mind. A voice, or perhaps a projection that I could not identify. The time has come. The judge of souls awaits. Fear took hold of me, but the curiosity, the insatiable need to know what lay behind this, drove me forward. I needed to understand the meaning of that message. I knew there was more at stake than just science. I was dealing with a force that transcended any logic I had known before. The next day, while observing the stars through the observation window, something strange happened. A dark shape, like a shadow cast in space, appeared on our radar. It was not an asteroid or any other known object. It was a presence. Something was approaching us, silently and incomprehensibly. At first, I tried to rationalize the event, but the calculations didn't add up. The shape was enormous, unfathomable. There was no way it could be detected by any human technology. I went to the observation room to take a closer look. The commander was there, staring at the screen with a pale expression. "What is that?" he asked, his voice trembling. The object was moving closer, but without making a sound. It was not reflecting the light from the stars, it was absorbing it. It was like an entity, a cosmic shadow that was traversing space, violating all the laws of physics we knew. "It's a ship," I said, not believing what I was seeing. But not just any ship. This isn't human. Before we could take any action, the ship began to approach even closer until it materialized directly in front of us, just a few kilometers away. It was something that defied reason. The structure, though metallic, emitted a dark aura, a presence of pure antiquity and desolation. Its design was antithetical to any form of engineering we knew. It was as if it were a living sculpture of metal, with shapes that twisted and folded, as if it were part of a civilization completely alien. Soon after, communication was interrupted again. A new message appeared on our screen. This time, there were no symbols or sounds, just an image, a face that was not human but bore a striking resemblance to the ancient depictions of Anubis, the Egyptian god of death. The vacant, piercing gaze seemed to penetrate our very thoughts as if it were judging us. The message that followed was brief but deeply disturbing. Anubis has called the children of eternity. Death comes to those who defy the gods. My mind, with all its scientific knowledge, could not comprehend what that meant. I couldn't fathom the purpose behind such an ancient and powerful entity. I knew that something much bigger was going on here, something that involved not just the fate of our mission, but the fate of humanity itself. And then the voice returned, louder than ever, as if it were coming from within my own mind. "You have been chosen, Dr. Abyss. You must choose between destroying or liberating." Panic gripped me, but before I could react, an explosion of light illuminated the space around the Tethys. The alien ship seemed to have launched something toward us. I was paralyzed, but the voice didn't stop. "Free yourself or face the judgment." In that moment, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. I was facing something that could not be explained, something that should not exist. The explosion of light was followed by a deafening silence. The radar of the Tethys was consumed by an intense glow, as if space itself were being reconfigured before our eyes. There was no way to react or escape. The space that had once been our frontier of exploration now seemed to bend around us, as if reality itself were distorting. And it was at that moment that I realized we were confronting something far beyond our capabilities. The alien ship was no longer in front of us, but its presence still seemed to linger. Communication failed once more, and the screen on our monitor went blank. The feeling of being watched was inescapable, and a chill ran down my spine. The commander couldn't hide the panic on his face. He turned to me as if I had some answer to what was happening. "Dr. Abyss," he said, his voice trembling, "what the hell is this? What do they want with us?" I had no answer. The truth was that, even with all my training, nothing in my vast knowledge of science, physics, astrobiology, or mythology had prepared me for this. Whatever was on the other side of this message was not from our reality. It was not something our civilization could understand. But the voice came again, stronger than ever, hissing inside my mind. "Choose, Dr. Abyss. The judgment will be made." At that moment, I knew this choice was not a metaphor. Whatever these beings were, they were challenging us, and the decision I made would determine the fate of everyone aboard the Tethys. But something else happened, something that made me realize the gravity of the situation in a brutal and immediate way. The alien ship emitted a pulse of energy that propagated toward us. On the monitor, a series of calculations and data began to pile up, but there was no time to process them. The Tethys began to vibrate violently, as if it were being pulled into a vortex. The ship would not withstand that pressure. With the navigation system now incapacitated, the only option was to try and reach the base on Mars, but it wouldn't be easy. The gravitational force the alien ship was generating was immense. We were being forced to choose, face the unknown, or rely on our capabilities and try to make it to the base before it was too late. The tension grew with every passing second. "Dr. Abyss," the commander said, trying to regain some control, "what should we do?" I looked at him, not knowing how to respond. At first I thought the alien ship was just observing us, but the message was becoming clearer. This was not just an interaction, it was a condemnation, or a summons. We must go to Mars," I said finally, my voice reflecting an uncertainty that, as a scientist, I never thought I would experience. "But we must alert Purple Lagoon." The others in the room looked at me confused. The last thing they expected to hear from me was an alliance with an organization that, in secret, researched and advanced mystical technologies, knowing the secrets that governments and organizations like Red Dragon and Gigantia were desperately trying to conceal. But that was what I did. Purple Lagoon, despite its dubious methods, was the only path left. And I knew that my experience within the organization gave me access to technologies and protocols that could help us deal with the threat we were facing, perhaps even provide a solution. However, as time passed and the pressure mounted, one question continued to echo in my mind. What, in the end, did the alien beings want with us? And was it possible that Purple Lagoon already knew more than it was letting on about this interplanetary threat? Finally arrived on the red planet. But what we found here made me reconsider whether the price of human exploration was worth it. The Tethys spacecraft sliced through Mars's thin atmosphere, and through the window, I observed the desolate landscape of the red planet. The emptiness of that dead world was overwhelming, with vast stretches of rusty sand interrupted only by craters and canyons. Mars had a stark beauty, but it was impossible not to feel the insignificance of humanity in the face of that immensity. As we approached the landing site, I could see the massive bases of purple lagoons scattered across the horizon. Huge domes and metallic towers stood out, connected by corridors snaking like glowing veins under the pale Martian sunlight. The purple banner of the organization fluttered imposingly, reminding everyone who ruled this territory. Farther away, the bases of other organizations could be glimpsed. Gigantia, with its massive sturdy structures and shades of aqua green, and Red Dragon, with aggressive, futuristic designs and blood-red emblems stark against their black flags. There was a silent tension between these organizations. None interfered directly with the work of the others, but rumors of occasional sabotage were common. Coexistence was fragile, sustained only by mutual fear and the promise of devastating retaliation. The spacecraft landed with a jolt, pulling me out of my thoughts. Descending the ramp, I was once again overcome by the strange mixture of fascination and terror I always felt upon stepping onto Mars. It was my fourth time here, but the feeling of emptiness never changed. On the contrary, it had worsened. The tense journey had amplified my unease. The facilities of Purple Lagoon were colossal. Transparent domes housed internal gardens and laboratories, while autonomous vehicles traveled the roads connecting the sectors. The sound of ventilation systems and the creaks of metallic structures broke the planet's oppressive silence. Even with all the technology and protection, Mars always seemed to be waiting to swallow everything whole again. General Alex Gray greeted me at the main entrance, his posture as rigid as ever. His eyes assessed everything with military precision. "Dr. Abyss, we appreciate your presence, but I must be direct. The situation here is more delicate than we imagined." "General Gray, I have important information. During our trajectory, we encountered an alien spacecraft. I am certain it belonged to the servants of Anubis," I said, pausing to gauge his reaction, though he remained impassive. "I believe they are aware of something we are doing here." The general exchanged a quick glance with one of his assistants before turning back to me. "We already know. We received a message, a warning to be precise." I was taken to the communications room, where a recording was playing on an endless loop. It was a guttural sound, mixed with electronic crackles and what sounded like an extinct language. Thanks to my expertise in linguistics and my affinity with ancient languages, I managed to decipher the essence of the message. "Cease your research. You do not understand what you are awakening. If you continue, we will destroy everyone on the planet." My mind began working rapidly. This was not the first time such messages had emerged in the context of alien discoveries. I wondered what exactly they were studying on Mars that would have drawn the attention of Anubis and his servants. "General, what is this research about?" I asked, trying to conceal my growing frustration. "I cannot disclose that information, Dr. Abyss. I can only say that we are dealing with something monumental, something that could redefine our understanding of history and life beyond Earth." I took a deep breath, trying to contain my irritation, and insisted, "General Gray, I am not easily impressed, but what I witnessed during the journey convinced me we are dealing with something greater than we imagined. I received a message from an ancient god, and now we have evidence to corroborate it. I need your cooperation." Gray studied me for long seconds before relenting, albeit reluctantly. "Very well, but know that what you see here cannot leave this planet." We were taken to an excavation site, protected by layers of security and an impressive number of scientists and soldiers. As we approached, a colossal structure began to emerge in the distance. It was a gigantic pyramid, weathered by time but still imposing. "It can't be," I murmured, trying to absorb what I was seeing. The inscriptions covering its surfaces were familiar but also strange, like a fusion of Egyptian hieroglyphs and an alien writing system. Something about the architecture and the energy of the place made my skin crawl. I understood then and there that this was not an ordinary tomb. Inside, scientists worked frantically with futuristic equipment that, ironically, seemed rudimentary amidst the grandeur of the pyramid. There was a palpable tension in the air, every glance laden with fear and uncertainty. "This is the tomb of Horus," Gray revealed, or, as I prefer to think of it, the prison of an alien god-king. My heart raced. The connection between Egyptian mythology and alien beings had always been a theory, but to see such tangible evidence was overwhelming. "Have you opened the tomb?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Yes, and we paid a high price for it." Gray led me to an isolated area of the base where I saw a group of scientists and soldiers confined in decontamination chambers. They all appeared gravely ill, with dark spots covering their skin and cloudy eyes. "A disease was released when we opened the tomb," he explained. "It killed half the team before we managed to contain it. You were called to study this, Dr. Abyss. We need a solution before it spreads." I examined samples and data for hours, and one thing became clear. The disease was not just biological. It had an energetic signature that seemed to interfere with brain waves and human DNA itself. "This is not just a biological trap," I murmured. "It is a message. Someone wanted to ensure no one would touch this tomb. Not to protect a treasure, but to prevent us from releasing whatever is inside." Gray seemed to ponder my words before speaking. "We are dealing with something beyond our comprehension, but we are too deep in to turn back now." As I reviewed records and studied the disease's effects, I began piecing things together. The rivalry between the Egyptian gods moved away from what we understand as mythology. It was a war between powerful alien beings, now threatening to drag humanity into the conflict. Horus was not a dead king, he was a prisoner. A being so dangerous that his enemies preferred to bury him on a distant planet rather than risk his existence. Now, we were about to release him. I sat down to record everything in my journal. "If you found this record, know that my intention was never to harm humanity, but the choices I will have to make in the coming days could change everything. I do not know if I will survive to report the outcome, but I will do my best to keep this journal updated. We are facing knowledge that could transform humanity, for better or worse. The research could lead us to lost technologies and truths about our own existence. But if we continue, we risk awakening Horus. And what would the consequences of that be? What are the limits of the pursuit of power and knowledge? What are the limits of curiosity? The Martian pyramid loomed before us like a sentinel from another era, its jagged edges casting a shadow that stretched for miles. To some, it was just a relic of an alien civilization, a testament to myths shared between gods and humans. But to us, those stationed at the Purple Lagoon base, it was the key to everything. To everything we feared, to everything we hoped for, and now, to everything that threatened to destroy us. The air around the pyramid was electric, a pulsating field of energy that made every hair on my body stand on end. I, Dr. Abyss, had devoted my life to deciphering ancient mysteries, believing that understanding the past would guide humanity's future. But standing before this colossal structure, I realized how naive that thought had been. This was no mere artifact. It was a weapon, and we were about to pull the trigger. "Dr. Abyss," a hoarse voice interrupted my thoughts. It was General Alex Gray, his grave expression reflecting the fear hidden behind his relentless demeanor. "The base is at risk. We're being attacked. We need you." I didn't need to ask who by. When he mentioned the danger, my instinct, honed by years of experience, already knew this was no simple attack. Something much bigger was in motion. But what? And why Mars? Why now, when we had finally started to understand what we were really dealing with? We hurried out of the control room, and soon, muffled explosions began to resonate through the station. The Purple Lagoon base was being invaded. The lights flickered, and alarms echoed through every corridor. The walls trembled from the impact of something colossal, and fear spread like a disease through the station. On my way to the command room, I found a scene of chaos. Security soldiers rushed back and forth, trying to organize the defense, while scientists and engineers struggled to maintain composure. But fear was in the air, palpable. "Here!" Gray shouted as he hurried toward the command center. When I entered the room, a hologram showed a massive ship hovering over Mars, a dark silhouette cutting through space like a shadow of death. Its contours were angular and brutal, with Egyptian inscriptions and symbols etched into its surface. Everything inside me screamed that this wasn't something humanity had made. It couldn't be. This can't be real, I murmured, feeling a wave of terror spread through my body. I had seen something like this before, in a ship that intercepted my path years ago, but this was different. Much larger, much more threatening. And the worst part, it was here, over Mars, where we were investigating the pyramid. "It's them," Gray said, his voice rough. "The servants of Anubis." There was no doubt. The connection between that ship and the beings attacking our base was clear. But the big question remained. Why would Anubis, an ancient god, be attacking Mars? And what did he want with the pyramid? We were dealing with something far bigger than any of us could have imagined. The first soldiers fell, torn apart by grotesque creatures descending from the ship beings with a canine appearance, semi-humanoid bodies, black as coal, with red eyes glowing with the fury of predators. Jackal dogs. They weren't just animals. They were soldiers, creatures from another dimension sent to cleanse. "Form a line, create a perimeter." Gray's orders rang out as the remnants of our defense force tried to respond. But it was clear we weren't prepared to face that horde. I saw one of the soldiers dragged into the darkness, the creature's sharp teeth slashing his throat before he could react. The sound of metal being crushed, the muffled scream, the blood spreading across the floor. Panic spread. What began as a pinpoint attack soon turned into a desperate battle for survival. "We need to evacuate to a safe location," Gray shouted, but I knew there was nowhere to run. The base was surrounded. Anubis' ship, now orbiting over the surface of Mars, was a massive shadow preventing any escape. Communications with Earth had been cut off. We were completely isolated. "Let's go to Gigantia and Red Dragon," I suggested, trying to find some logic amidst the chaos. If we've been attacked, they must have been too. Even though they were rivals of Purple Lagoon, all three organizations had been involved in studying the pyramid, and if one base had been destroyed, the others were surely under threat as well. Perhaps, just perhaps, we could find some temporary alliance to survive this. But what we found was even more terrifying. The Gigantia and Red Dragon bases were in ruins. Destruction was total. What remained were groups of survivors, more shadows of their former forces, struggling to resist the attack of the jackal dogs. We had to unite. There was no other option. Scientists, military, and engineers, all together now, fighting against a threat we hadn't even imagined possible. With no communication with Earth, no help in sight, we were forced to create a survival strategy. And where else could we turn for answers but the Pyramid of Horus? But as we approached it, the dilemmas began to intensify. The pyramid was not just an object of study. It was something more, something far more dangerous. We knew that within its depths was the tomb of Horus. But what we also knew, and what haunted me, was that the unique energy signature we had detected there could be the key to an incomprehensible power or a global disaster. The hieroglyphs on the pyramid, with their mystical and arcane symbols, began to reveal secrets that were not meant for us. Horus and Anubis, seemingly enemies, appeared to have an intertwined history. But why would Anubis attack now, at this exact moment? What did he fear about the awakening of Horus? What was in that tomb that could be more valuable or dangerous than any known technology? At some point, my mind began to drown in possible answers. The only thing I knew for sure was that if we awakened Horus, we could unleash something far beyond our ability to control. But if we didn't, we would be leaving Mars, and perhaps Earth, at the mercy of Anubis and his servants. We reached Horus's tomb, a colossal chamber. The sarcophagus inside was massive, made for a being at least 12 meters tall. The inscriptions around it spoke of an incomprehensible power, but also of a cosmic battle that had been fought between these ancient gods. Horus, Anubis, Set, Ra. They were all connected, but where were the others? The decision was made. The only way to understand what was truly at stake was to awaken Horus. But what could happen when we did? We were forced to take the risk. With a swift motion, I activated the mechanism, and a wave of golden energy flooded the room. The tremor that followed was so intense that the pyramid seemed alive. Horus's sarcophagus began to open, revealing something colossal. The entire structure shook, as if Mars itself was bowing before that primal force. Horus had awakened. The ground trembled, the walls shattered, and the sound of something enormous awakening was deafening. But would Horus be our salvation, or our doom? The desert of Mars was never a place of peace, but nothing could compare to the chaos that now consumed the red planet. The first tremors of Horus's awakening echoed through space like a cosmic thunderclap. Shockwaves swept across the barren landscapes, where ancient and mysterious technology was about to be revealed. Mars was no longer the planet that humans thought they were controlling with their scientific research. Now, it had become a battlefield, and it all started with a choice we made. We came to Mars with the intent of making the greatest scientific discoveries in history. The mission was clear: investigate an ancient pyramid found in a remote valley of the planet. During our excavation work, a growing sense of unease began to creep in every day, though none of us could fathom what awaited us. The pyramid appeared to be a cosmic artifact, perhaps from a civilization far older than anything we had ever known. That's when the unexpected happened. A being, whom we identified as an alien god connected to Earth, attacked our base. It sent us a message, a threat. Do not touch the pyramid. Stop your research, or I will destroy everything. As always, Purple Lagoon disregarded the warning. Human vanity and the thirst for knowledge always outweigh the fear of the unknown. We couldn't stop. As expected, the reaction from those on Mars came swiftly. Anubis servants descended from the skies. They were hybrid creatures, biomechanical hunters, with bodies that merged flesh and metal. Their mission? To destroy everything. And it wasn't just our base that was obliterated. The facilities of Gigantia and Red Dragon were also destroyed. These two rival organizations, once locked in a constant power struggle, now had no choice but to join forces. But in the end, none of that mattered. I, Dr. Abyss, knew there was something more within that pyramid. During the battle, I managed to access some information contained within a sarcophagus inside. The revelation was terrifying. The pyramid was not a tomb, it was a prison. What was trapped there was not something from the past, it was something from the present. Horus, the god who once ruled the galaxy, a being with unimaginable powers. And then the decision was made. We had no choice but to release Horus. But what did this mean? Was it a blessing or a curse? We didn't know. But the battle against the forces threatening Mars, and even Earth, had already begun. The awakening of Horus was nothing short of catastrophic. The impact of his presence was immediate. The sensors in our bases recorded a shockwave so strong it seemed to come not from Mars, but from somewhere far beyond. The already hostile Martian atmosphere was soon racked by violent disturbances. The dust storms, which were common on the planet, grew massive, as if the wind itself were being controlled by a supernatural force. Horus, unaware of what was happening around him, began to move, and he was not at peace. It was as though he had awoken from a long sleep and was disoriented, yet still capable of causing destruction. He was, without a doubt, the embodiment of fury. At the same time, panic spread among the Purple Lagoon teams and those from the other organizations. No one knew for sure what Horus wanted or what he represented now. His golden eyes gleamed with a supernatural power. He looked out at the desert before him, and with a simple movement of his hand, a blue shockwave swept across the last of Anubis' tenobiological hounds. Those who had come to hunt and destroy were now dead, their bodies disintegrated by the energy Horus unleashed. His mothership retreated, likely unprepared to deal with such devastating power. I, Dr. Abyss, observed all of this from my strategic position, trying to understand what was happening. Communication was difficult. We tried to use radio channels, but all we received were distorted signals. All we could do was wait. But deep down, I knew something worse was coming. Horus walked through the devastated Martian desert, his footsteps reverberating like thunder. he didn't seem to be seeking revenge. Instead, he began to lift ancient structures buried under the sand, monoliths and obelisks that no one knew existed. This didn't seem like a mere display of power. It was a deliberate action. He was awakening something I still didn't understand. As he touched each obelisk, hieroglyphs began to glow, emitting a golden light that cut through the Martian darkness. I couldn't wait any longer. I knew it was time to risk everything. I tried to approach Horus, a mere mortal before a god, but as I drew near, he gazed at me with penetrating eyes, and for a moment I thought he might destroy me. But something strange happened. Instead of attacking me, Horus seemed to pause. He looked at me with an expression I could only describe as curious. Perhaps he knew I wasn't an enemy. Maybe in his disorientation, he realized we were all the same, lost. Then, something began to happen. A psychic wave, almost like a flow of thoughts, invaded my mind. Horus didn't speak the way humans speak, but the message was clear, as if he were communicating directly with my consciousness. The language was incomprehensible at first, a swirl of sounds that I couldn't process. But as he tried again, the language began to shift. The words became more familiar until I finally understood. Long ago, my brothers and I ruled the galaxy. His voice echoed in my mind. He told me of his reign. Horus, Anubis, Set, and Ra. Each ruled over a constellation. They were more than gods. They were cosmic beings. But when they came to Earth, everything changed. They helped humanity be born, but an ancient entity, one that already dwelled in Earth's seas, attacked their creations. What followed was a devastating war that destroyed everything. Horus wanted to rebuild, but Anubis did not. He wanted more. Anubis, thirsting for power, found something called the Black Ether, a mysterious substance that gave him strength, but at the cost of his humanity. In his obsession, Anubis sought to conquer the galaxy, forgetting Earth. Horus and his brothers were divided. Horus, however, tried to stop him, defeating Set and imprisoning him. But Anubis, growing ever stronger, managed to wound him gravely. I perished, Anubis imprisoned me. Now he is stronger than ever. His voice echoed with sorrow in my mind, a melancholy that didn't seem to come from a god, but from a soul marked by loss. In shock, I asked the burning question in my mind. What is your goal with these obelisks you're unearthing? Horus looked at me with a serious expression. I need to send a message. I need to contact my sister Ra. Only she can help. The weight of what he had just revealed about his battle with Anubis and the fate that seemed to have befallen him at Anubis's hands paralyzed me for a moment. Horus, the great and mighty god of the heavens, now seemed fragile in the face of his defeat. But the implications were even deeper. The destruction caused by this war between them, these beings beyond human comprehension, seemed to have shaped the fate of Earth, and perhaps now of Mars. At that moment, a darker understanding began to take shape. The flood, that cataclysmic event that human civilizations called the end of the world, was not just a legend. The revolt of the water entity caused something so devastating that it forced the gods to intervene directly. And Horus, in his attempt to save Earth, was defeated. But the story didn't end there. Horus was back, and the consequences of his awakening were unimaginable. If Anubis had become an unrecognizable force with the Black Ether, what did that mean for the present? Their battle was far from resolved, and its impact could be catastrophic for the entire universe. You don't understand, Horus continued, as if my own uncertainties had become clear to him. I woke up in a world I no longer recognize. I have no idea how Anubis came to Mars, or what he did with the power he acquired. The last time I battled him, he was strong, but not strong enough to defeat me completely. Now he must be an unrecognizable force, without limits. His voice resonated with deep gravity. I knew that as he spoke, time was running out. The obelisks, with their ethereal energy, seemed to be part of a larger movement. Horus wanted to send a message, something beyond what I could fully understand. His need to contact Ra was desperate, but how could I help him when he himself seemed uncertain of what to do? He walked through the Martian desert, surrounded by the remnants of the ancient structures he was beginning to unearth, as though he were uncovering the keys to a power that could reverse everything. His hands, more imposing and ancient than any human could imagine, touched the obelisks with silent reverence, as if each touch were a prayer, a plea for what was lost to finally be recovered. Horus looked at me, his eyes intense, like distant suns, focused on me with an intensity that made the weight of the entire galaxy fall upon my shoulders. "I need to send a message," he said seriously. "I need to communicate with Ra. She has to know what happened to Anubis. The entire universe could be destroyed if he continues his path." The consequences of not helping him were clear. I had to make a decision. The stakes were higher than I had ever imagined, and whatever it took to help Horus, I would do, even if the price was higher than I could ever imagine. As the ship approaches, a thunderclap is heard in the sky over the red planet, and a heavy vibration hangs in the air. I, with my insignificance before these beings, didn't know what it was, but Horus recognized it. I couldn't tell if it was a threat or help. One thing was certain: humanity was now once again in the midst of a conflict between ancient gods. Do you believe the cosmos has always been silent? Think again. Now an awakened god, an ancestral call echoes through the corners of the universe. On the human base on Mars, an ancient being reveals itself. As the interdimensional threat draws near, humanity braces for action. Will an ancient god, a cosmic entity now awakened, fight alongside humanity? Prepare yourself, for what is coming is not a battle. It is a new cycle of destruction and rebirth. Anubis, an ancient alien, invaded our base on Mars. His mission was simple: to stop us from awakening what should have remained forgotten. But it was too late. Humanity had been bold. We did the unthinkable. We awakened Horus, long buried beneath the sands of the Red Planet. And now, in a moment of despair, he did the impossible. He contacted his sister, Ra, a goddess long forgotten through the ages, and she answered. What follows are entries from my journal, which I am unsure how long I will be able to keep updated. My name is Dr. Abyss, and everything you read or hear here must remain here. Answering her brother's call, Horus, Ra bent space and time, appearing within fractions of a second. The Martian sky began to transform as if the very fabric of the cosmos were being torn apart. Ra's presence, with her golden and white light, seemed to dominate the environment. Even with all the knowledge I had accumulated, I felt my smallness before the grandeur of that moment. Horus appeared calm, but something in his posture hinted at a veiled apprehension. He knew what would come next, would change the course of the universe. Ra's ship descended over the horizon with an indescribable magnificence. Its form was simultaneously fluid and solid, a strange fusion of biology and technology that defied any earthly logic. It seemed alive, as if it were a colossal cosmic creature that had learned to mold itself with the matter of the stars. The front of the ship bore a colossal face, an ancient Egyptian entity with penetrating eyes and an expression that conveyed both wisdom and profound fatigue. The lines of the face were deeply etched into the ship, as if its origin were both flesh and metal. From these lines emerged shapes that distorted constantly, as though the very structure were in perpetual transformation. The ship emanated tentacles, long, twisted, and hypnotically fluid, extending into the air as if searching for something lost or capturing the energy of the planet itself. Faces appeared and vanished among the ship's pulsating waves, like lost souls wandering the depths of space, drawn into the complex machinery, blending flesh and metal. As the ship drew nearer, I realized it was not alone. It brought servants, beings who, though humanoid in structure, were far taller, stronger, and carried an unmistakable aura of authority. Their figures were cloaked in sleek metallic suits, a star-forged alloy, flexible yet resistant beyond comprehension. The silvery sheen of their armor reflected Ra's light, distorting it as if concealing something beneath the surface. Unlike Horus and Ra, who communicated telepathically in a fluid and direct manner, these servants lacked such abilities. Their communication seemed limited to body language and a silent expression, their attentive gazes unsettling. They moved with mechanical precision, driven by an immutable purpose. Ra, with her eternal and profound gaze, appeared momentarily unaware of our presence, as though her mind lingered in another plane of existence. Her servants, however, remained vigilant, awaiting their next order. The overwhelming sense that we were witnessing something immense and incomprehensible filled me with awe. As all this unfolded, the black ether spread further across the universe, and Anubis's shadow loomed over the future. I spoke, the weight of the moment pressing my voice. Ra, what happened to your faith and balance? Where is the justice you once embodied before gods and mortals? My words echoed, carrying not only scientific logic but a deep reverence for traditions I knew well. In ancient Egypt, you were the force that upheld Ma'at, the universal balance. The eternal cycle of life and death, order and chaos, all depended on your presence. You were the light that restored order in the darkest times. Even though the black ether has altered everything, even though time has corrupted our perception of justice, there is nothing that a force like you cannot reclaim. Anubis must be defeated, or creation itself will be lost. Ra observed me silently, and for a moment I felt as though her memories were unraveling, revealing secrets of past eras. Her image shifted from a distant goddess to a cosmic force that had witnessed the birth and death of stars. Horus stood by, watchful yet uncertain. He understood that the goddess before us was no longer the same. Ra sighed, a sigh that carried the weight of millennia. What you fail to understand, Dr. Abyss, is that the Ma'at that once existed no longer applies. The universe as we knew it has lost its meaning. What Anubis corrupted was not just the order I represented, but the foundation of existence itself. The black ether is not mere distortion, it is the death of creation, the end of all that is known. I am part of this cycle, but perhaps not enough to restore it. I stepped forward, trying to contain my growing anxiety. No, Ra. The true Ma'at is not lost. What Anubis has brought is not death but a false death, a lie. Balance is in your hands, as it always has been. The light, truth, and justice you represent can still prevail. Horus gazed at Ra with a grim expression. We cannot let the cycle of chaos continue. We cannot allow Anubis to define the universe. Ra's golden eyes glowed with almost painful intensity. I was justice, the light that lit the path. But now, perhaps it is time for darkness. Perhaps this is the end of the cycle. Ra, if you retreat now, balance will not be restored, I urged. The black ether is not true darkness. If you refuse to fight, total destruction will follow, and the universe will lose its light forever. Ra studied Horus, then me, as if our words were pieces of a puzzle she had long tried to solve. The tension in the air was palpable. You speak with the fervor of one who still believes in what lies ahead, she said softly. Perhaps, Dr. Abyss, you are right. To save what remains, I must rekindle the flame that once guided the gods. I will fight, not for you, but for creation, for the Ma'at that still pulses within me. And with that, her light shone brighter than a star about to be reborn. What was about to unfold would be the oldest and most decisive battle in the history of the universe. The confrontation with Anubis was about to begin, and now we mortals and immortals would stand side by side against the shadow threatening to destroy everything. The future then seemed more uncertain than ever. Ra's ship loomed on the horizon, its colossal form distorting Mars' reddish sky. The energy emanating from it induced a sense of megalophobia, as if space itself was being compressed and expanded simultaneously. Its presence was undeniable. Its power seemed to warp the surrounding space, creating an oppressive sensation that invaded the air in our bodies. The human bases on Mars were already destroyed, and the infrastructure we had built was now mere rubble. Staying there was no longer an option. Our departure was inevitable. In front of the ship, Ra's servants awaited, imposing figures who were more than just soldiers. They were extensions of Ra's will, beings forged from a fusion of biology and technology. But something more urgent was unfolding before us. Horus, his gaze fixed on the horizon, didn't seem surprised. He already knew what to do next. We must restore my servants, Horus said, his voice firm yet tinged with apprehension. With mechanical engineering, quantum science, and genetic manipulation, I will have to recreate my army. And for that, I will need your help, Ra. The goddess remained silent for a moment, but her energy radiated an immense and unyielding presence. What I propose will not be easy, but if necessary, we will do whatever it takes to restore balance. Our next step, Horus continued, will be to travel to a forgotten planet beyond the borders of known systems. There, we will collect the materials needed to begin building my army and the weapons we will use to fight Anubis. As the conversation unfolded, I observed every movement and word with growing tension. The idea of rebuilding an army, a force capable of challenging cosmic entities, was both thrilling and terrifying. The weight of responsibility was on them, and I, merely a spectator among titans, felt increasingly small in the face of the grandeur of what was to come. Then, in the corner of the room, I noticed something unusual. A small technobiological dog, a hybrid creature blending organic biology with advanced technology, was watching attentively. It moved stealthily, avoiding detection, but its implanted sensors and cameras recorded every word, every gesture. Before I could act, a bright light emanated from Ra's figure. A burst of energy disintegrated the dog with a precision unmatched even by the most advanced technology. However, before being destroyed, the small being did something that surprised me. It programmed a message, an echo of its last action, before being consumed by the light. "He already knows we have gathered," said Ra, her voice now laden with the seriousness of someone who understood what was coming. "Anubis has been alerted. He will attack or seek reinforcements." Horus seemed contemplative, the weight of Ra's words hanging in the air. We cannot wait. And so the future unfolded before us, a colossal battle between ancient gods and the shadow army that Anubis was preparing. What would happen next? The answer was already in motion, and we all knew there was no turning back. As I watched Mars' sky, now illuminated by Ra's arrival and the weight of the decision ahead, a cold sensation ran down my spine. Something was not right. The burst of light that destroyed the technobiological dog was not merely a security measure. It was a message, a warning. I knew that no matter how the gods' actions shaped the destiny of the universe, something else, something hidden in the shadows, was waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. What was Anubis truly planning, and what could we mortals do against such an incomprehensible power? I didn't know, but one thing was certain. The battle was only just beginning, and in the darkness that followed, something even more terrible lay in wait. The sands of Mars looked as red as the blood flowing through my veins, and yet something even deeper was about to be spilled onto this barren soil. Ra was here. She did not appear as light nor as an abstract deity. She stood before us, flesh and circuits, a fusion of biology and technology so advanced it was impossible to discern where one ended and the other began. And now she stood alongside Horus, an unlikely ally forged under even stranger circumstances, united by a single goal, to fight Anubis, the god of the underworld. But I knew there was more at stake than just this. Horus, with all his cosmic authority, didn't fully believe Ra was committed, and I, with all my doubts and analysis, knew she hadn't revealed everything. I looked at Horus, then at Ra. The tension was palpable. They had debated for hours about the alliance, but something didn't fit. Ra, with her vast cosmic knowledge and scientific vision, seemed reluctant to fight alongside Horus. She had her own plans, and I was the link that had convinced her to join him based on the premise that without united forces, we would all perish under Anubis's grasp. But as the battle against Anubis loomed closer, I saw the pieces moving on the cosmic chessboard, and Ra wasn't just an ally, she was manipulating more than we realized. Ra, with her technobiological servants, now stood before us on Mars, slowly approaching the circle of obelisks. Horus, imposing and with eyes shimmering with ancient power, watched her, though a faint discomfort flickered in his gaze. I knew that, no matter how united they seemed, trust between the two was still being built, and perhaps I was the only one who could grasp the nuances of what was happening. Ra spoke first, her voice soft yet imbued with cosmic authority. "I accept the alliance, Horus, but know this, I am not here to serve your will. I am here to fulfill a greater purpose. Horus did not respond immediately, but his rigid posture suggested caution. He knew he couldn't control Ra as he would lesser gods or cosmic creatures. "And what purpose is that, Ra?" he asked, his voice low and tinged with distrust. "What do you truly seek from this?" Ra turned to me. Her eyes, like two orbs of pure light, reflected a wisdom transcending the boundaries of time. "You know, Abyss. You know what I am and what I want. Humanity was abandoned by its creators. They left humans at the mercy of their frailties. Now the time has come to guide them. They have potential. Together, we can evolve them into something much greater." I felt the weight of her words. Horus seemed uneasy, but I understood what she was saying. Ra wasn't just thinking of protecting humanity. She wanted to evolve it, to create a new race, a fusion of humans and her technobiological servants. As a scientist, I knew the risks this posed, but I also knew her vision was captivating, and perhaps, deep down, I even wondered if humanity could achieve something more, something beyond its biological limits. "You're talking about genetic manipulation, Ra," I said, trying to read her gaze. "You want to merge humans with your technology, to transform them into something different." Ra didn't deny it. "Yes," she replied with a cold smile, "but it's not just about merging biology and technology. It's about giving them what they've never had, a true purpose, a connection to the cosmos. They will be more than mere mortals. They will transcend the limits of flesh and machine." I knew this was more than just evolution. This was a radical transformation, a process of cosmic domination disguised as aid. If humanity were shaped by Ra, it would lose its essence. It would become part of something far greater, but lose its identity in the process. I, Dr. Abyss, had to decide whether to be complicit in this change or to stop it at all costs. As Ra and Horus debated, General Alex Gray observed from a distance, listening to the entire conversation through advanced equipment. He knew about the alliance, but disagreed with the way things were unfolding. He had a different vision of humanity's place in the cosmos. To him, any involvement with Ra or other cosmic beings was a betrayal of humanity's principles. "You don't understand, Abyss," a disguised message came through my communicator, hidden in my ear so no one else noticed. "Ra isn't here to help. She's building a galactic empire. We can't allow her to interfere with our genes, with our species. She's not a savior, she's a conqueror in disguise." Gray's perspective was simplistic, as always, and he failed to see the bigger picture. Ra wasn't just trying to conquer, she was attempting to reshape humanity. But at the same time, she had her own goals that were beyond the comprehension of any mortal. I gazed at the red skies of Mars and heard Gray's words echoing in my mind. He was right about one thing. By aligning with Ra, we were taking a tremendous risk. But I couldn't ignore what Ra was saying. Humans had been abandoned, and it was time to evolve them, or they risked fading into cosmic oblivion. Horus interrupted the tension with his penetrating gaze. "The war against Anubis is approaching. If we don't unite, we will all lose. But understand this, Ra, we will do this my way. You won't have total control." Ra smiled as if she already knew what would happen. "Don't worry, Horus, I don't need your control. I have other plans." I knew Ra was playing a deeper game than any of us could perceive. She was already moving her pieces, and if we weren't careful, we could be consumed by her vision of a new cosmos, a new civilization where humanity no longer had a voice. As Ra and Horus solidified their alliance, I delved deeper into research to uncover what Ra truly intended for humanity. She wanted to create a cosmic civilization, but this meant humans would ultimately be subjugated to a new order of hybrid beings, a fusion of biological and technobiological entities. Ra wanted to reshape humanity, and this meant genetic manipulation. But what she didn't openly admit was that she had no intention of preserving humans as they were. They would merely be the foundation for something much greater, a new form of cosmic life, closer to her own people. "I see what you're doing, Ra," I said as we prepared for the next phase of our contact with humans. "You're creating a new empire, but it's not about saving humanity. It's about reshaping it in your image. We can't allow this." Ra, with an enigmatic smile, replied, "You're a smart man, Abyss. You know far more than you let on. But in the end, you'll understand. What I do is inevitable. Humans will need this. And in the end, when Anubis is defeated, you'll see that evolution will be our greatest victory." I looked at Horus and then at the skies of Mars, feeling the weight of what was to come. The true battle was just beginning, but the line between saving or destroying humanity was thinner than ever. General Alex Gray was already preparing for war. He knew that Ra was infiltrating the heart of humanity, attempting to shape it into something that could no longer be controlled. But for me, the real question was, who would control humanity's destiny? Ra's ship, a monolith of metal and condensed energy, rose against the reddish sky of Mars. Horus, standing beside me, watched it with a mixture of respect and mistrust. Recently awakened from his long hibernation, he was about to leave Mars, leaving behind a ravaged base and a fragile alliance. Ra and he were preparing to embark on a mission I did not fully understand, a journey to restore Ra's army on a distant, forgotten planet in the galaxy. I knew that without them, the balance of power would be disrupted. Ra hadn't come just to fight Anubis. She had come to transform everything, starting with humanity. "I can't let this happen, Abyss," Horus said in his deep voice, like cosmic thunder. "You and the humans must reorganize, form alliances with Gigantia and Red Dragon. Forget your disputes. The enemy is greater than anything you've ever faced." Ra, with an enigmatic smile, looked at me. "For now, there's nothing more to do here, but when we return, everything will be different. Your role, Abyss, will be more important than you realize." I felt the weight of her words, and once again I found myself torn. The war was approaching, but the true battle would be for the soul of humanity. It would be altered, fused with the technology Ra had brought, but what would remain of its spirit? What would remain of us? Ra entered her ship, and Horus followed, his eyes radiating an ancient power he still didn't know how to control. Ra's ship ascended, slicing through Mars' red sky before vanishing into the infinite. The sound of its departure echoed briefly, but was soon replaced by a tense silence, the kind of silence that precedes a storm. With their departure, I was left alone on the battlefield, surrounded by the destruction of Purple Lagoon's bases. But something there caught my attention, a small metallic pyramid, the monolith, resting on an improvised operating table. It was the last remnant of the technology Ra had left behind, a quantum computer capable of manipulating matter with astonishing precision. It was an essential piece for reconstruction, a key to survival. I knew its presence wasn't just a tool, it was a promise that if I made the right decisions, the future could be ours. But I also knew that every choice I made would bring me closer to a point of no return. With calculated steps, I approached the monolith. It activated automatically, projecting several augmented reality screens before me, displaying visions of destroyed bases, reconstruction plans, and unknown codes. The images flickered in front of me, and I knew what was about to happen would be decisive. Ra's ship faded into the red Martian horizon with a low rumble. Horus followed alongside her, both disappearing into the void of space. I watched them leave, a knot tightening in my chest. The war that began with the threat of Anubis was now taking a new shape with Ra's arrival and the power she represented. However, there was something about their departure that felt more like a transition than an end. It was then, in the silence that followed, that I felt a familiar presence. General Alex Gray didn't approach immediately, but his robust figure and rigid posture were there, watching from a respectful distance. He had been on Mars before me, observing events with a distrustful eye. Always in the background, he did not trust the alien gods or their intentions, and feared what their presence would mean for humanity's future. To him, we were still just pawns in a much larger game played by forces beyond our comprehension. When the last lights of Ra's ship faded in the sky, the general did what seemed inevitable. He approached, his face marked by deep skepticism and at the same time a contained curiosity. "Don't ask me to trust this, Abyss." His voice cut through the air, cold as the metal of his boots striking Mars's surface. He continued, "These gods, they're not our allies. They have a plan that's beyond anything you or I can comprehend, And that technology of theirs, it's not ours to use. We can't allow it to alter the course of humanity. We don't know what they really want. I turned to him, feeling the tension grow between us. Ra's technology, the monolith, pulsed with a mysterious energy, waiting for my interaction, waiting for me to make the decision that would change the future. But the general, once again, was right. We didn't know what Ra and Horus truly planned, and yet my scientific curiosity was stronger than any fear he could instill. "Stay vigilant, Abyss," he continued, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "They're playing a game you can't fully understand, and you know that, in the end, it's us who will bear the consequences." I looked at Mars' desolate sky, where silence seemed to be an answer, but not a resolution. What began as a simple battle against a supernatural threat was now unfolding into something much more complex. The war was no longer just about Anubis or Ra. The real battle would be for humanity's identity, and it seemed we were nearing a point where even the options we had in hand were not ours to choose. I looked at the monolith again, radiating a soft and disturbing light. Humanity's future depended on the choices I would make now. And with each step, the line between saving or dooming us all began to blur, leaving only the void ahead. "I know what's at stake," I said, finally breaking the silence. "But if we stand still, we'll lose everything." The general didn't respond immediately. He simply observed me with the look of someone who knew that, deep down, none of our options seemed good enough. But one thing was certain. The game was in motion, and we could no longer afford to stay on the sidelines. Suddenly, small shadows appeared on the horizon, a presence that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't Ra, it wasn't Horus, but something was approaching. The monolith pulsed with an energy that wasn't just technological, it felt alive. And I knew that, with Ra and Horus's departure, a new enemy was about to emerge. The future of humanity was at stake, and now, more than ever, I didn't know who to trust. Whatever was coming was almost here, and the clock for our survival was ticking. My name is Dr. Abyss, and what you are about to read must remain a secret. If this information falls into the wrong hands, it could unleash a hysteria that would dwarf the destruction we faced on Mars. This is not a tale of victory, but of bitter survival. After Horus and Ra abandoned us to our own miseries, they left behind a devastated world. Mars, our promise for the future, is now a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered hopes. The base was in ruins, courtesy of the Hounds of Anubis, and all that remained was the monolith left by Ra, an artifact that seemed to pulse with intentions of its own. Our only choice was to rebuild with what we had, or perish. But the real nightmare began earlier, when the expedition that freed Horus also unleashed something far worse, an alien virus. It embedded itself in the explorers' bodies, transforming them into aberrations that defy reason. Now we are surrounded by these grotesque creatures on a planet where the sandstorm never ceases, and each grain seems to echo a prelude to our death. It didn't take me long to realize that something terrible had happened. I was outside the base, adjusting one of the monolith's transmitters, when the sound pierced the thin atmosphere. Inside the makeshift dome, chaos spread like wildfire. The sandstorm howled around us, muffling everything, but that sound, human and yet not, stood out. "Abyss, you'd better see this," Alex Gray said, his firm voice barely concealing the horror. I followed him inside, where two of our soldiers, Ramos and Carter, writhed on the ground, their faces twisted into masks of agony. Ramos had black voids where his eyes should have been. From them oozed filaments that pulsed like exposed nerves. Carter no longer had hands, just jagged claws that bled as he tried to scratch at anything around him. "Stand back," Gray ordered, drawing his weapon. "No," I protested, grabbing his arm. "If they're infected with the virus, I might be able to find something. A solution." Gray stared at me with the coldness of a man who already knew there was no solution. "They're dead, Abyss. They just don't know it yet." A second later, Ramos rose. His body shouldn't have moved like that. It was as if every bone had been broken and reassembled by a mind alien to human anatomy. He let out a chilling growl and lunged. Gray fired. Ramos fell, but the sound of gunfire attracted something outside. The storm roared louder, as if Mars itself were laughing at us. The monolith seemed to glow as we debated our next move. Gray wanted to evacuate immediately, but I knew there was nowhere to go. Red Dragon and Gigantia were hiding in their bunkers, watching from afar, with no intention of helping. "You want to trust cowards?" Gray spat when I suggested asking for aid. As we argued, Carter, who should have been dead, appeared. No longer human, he led a group of infected, once familiar faces, now unrecognizable. The storm enveloped them like a shroud, amplifying the horror. That's when I realized the virus wasn't just a weapon. It was a message. The infected murmured to each other in a language that wasn't human. The fragments I could decipher formed a name, Anubis. The attack came without warning. Grotesque shadows emerged from the swirling storm, twisted, cracked, and incomprehensible at first glance. Ramos and Carter, the two we had lost to the virus, led the horde. But these were no longer Ramos and Carter. Their bodies had been warped into something that only vaguely resembled humanity. Skin dark as Martian ash stretched taut over bones that jutted at impossible angles. Tendrils, like exposed nerves, pulsed across their skulls. They advanced in a wave, each step amplifying their fury. The air reeked of rot, a fetid blend of burnt oil and decaying flesh. The sound was worse, a cacophony of grunts, bone cracks, and a collective murmur in a language that made my mind throb with pain. "Fall back, now!" Gray shouted, firing at the creatures. Each shot was like muffled thunder drowned out by the storm. Ramos, or what was left of him, took a shot to the chest, but it didn't stop him. He stumbled but kept coming, his grotesque smile stretching across his mangled face. Behind me, Davis and Lee held the line. "Hold the line!" Davis bellowed as Lee distributed fragmentation grenades. Each explosion sent showers of sand and grotesque limbs into the air, but for every creature that fell, two more emerged from the sands. Gray grabbed my arm, nearly dragging me into the corridor. The walls were caked with dust, and the lights flickered erratically. "Go, Abyss! We need to reach the dome!" Behind us, Davis and Lee retreated step by step, firing at the encroaching monsters. "Lee, to your right!" Davis shouted, but before Lee could react, one of the infected seized him. Lee's scream was more than human. It was a sound filled with fear, pain, and resignation. He was dragged into the storm, and all that remained was the sound of flesh tearing and bones snapping. I couldn't look back. My entire body trembled, but Gray pulled me forward as if his life depended on it, because it did. Davis caught up to us, panting, his face smeared with blood and dust. "They're everywhere," he yelled. His hands trembled, but his eyes still burned with determination. "You two need to go. I'll hold them off." "Don't be stupid, Davis," I protested, trying to pull him along, but he had already made his decision. Davis positioned himself in the corridor, blocking our only escape route. He held the last of our grenades, his fingers gripping the pins with a calm resolve. "You both have to survive. End this. Figure out what this virus is." "Davis, you don't have to." I started, but my voice faltered. He just smiled, a sad, resigned smile. "Go, Abyss. If you stay here, no one gets out alive." Gray yanked me harder, dragging me down the corridor as I looked back. Davis waited until we were a safe distance away before pulling the pins. He shouted something, perhaps a prayer, perhaps a curse, and the grenades detonated, filling the corridor with blinding light and the deafening sound of stone and flesh being obliterated. The walls trembled, and part of the ceiling collapsed, sealing the path behind us. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the chaos before. Gray and I stumbled into the isolation dome, gasping for breath and covered in dust. The only sound was the wind battering the reinforced walls. For a moment, I thought we were safe, but the realization hit like a blade to the chest. The transmitter, our last connection to Earth, was on the far side of the corridor. Gray looked at me, exhausted but resolute. "We're alive, Abyss. That's what matters now." I stared out at the storm, its fury carrying the screams and remains of those who had fallen. I wanted to believe his words, but deep down, I knew the fight was far from over. The monolith glowed faintly in the distance, mocking us, as if it held secrets we could never hope to comprehend. The virus wasn't just a weapon, it was a chant of destruction, a message left by Anubis for anyone foolish enough to disturb Mars's secrets. And us? We had done no more than scratch the surface of this abyss. The storm raged on, and every shadow on the horizon seemed to whisper that the true horror was yet to come. The monolith glowed again as if mocking our plight. Gray looked at me, his face covered in dust and despair. Abyss, this isn't over. They'll be back. I nodded, my gaze fixed on the storm outside, because deep down I knew he was right. As a scientist, I must admit I cannot identify the exact signature the monolith is emitting, but if it's transmitting something, then surely something is receiving it. A chilling shiver ran down my spine, and for the first time since I arrived here, I deeply regretted landing on the red planet. This is my journal, and I will try to keep it updated for as long as I can. But remember, if you are hearing or reading this, then it's already too late. After the explosion that eradicated the alien zombie horde and dismantled what remained of the human base on Mars, our priority was reconstruction. Mars, however, is not a planet that forgives mistakes, and the desolation we encountered upon arrival was a reflection of an abandoned place, where unknown forces move in the shadows. Amidst the dust and debris, a new threat was approaching. Pirates. I think the right word would be raiders, but that doesn't do justice to the nature of what is about to cross my path. They were more than just mercenaries. They were survivors of a peculiar kind, people who made deals with chaos and destruction. I was in my laboratory, immersed in an analysis of the data that had managed to be saved, when something caught my attention. The distant sound of broken engines. A metallic creaking echoed in the distance. At first I thought it was just a shift in the Martian wind, but the sound persisted, growing clearer, closer. My first impression was that the ship was a remnant, like a broken toy from some extinct civilization. It approached slowly, cutting through the Martian sky like a wandering shadow. What caught my attention immediately were the many parts and pieces of other ships haphazardly attached to its structure, creating a chaotic appearance where nothing seemed to fit logically. The hull, a mix of rusty metal and warped plastics, seemed to be made from the remains of ships that had long met their end. There was no uniformity. The windows looked like they were from another era, small and rounded, as if from the 2000s, yet they were in a fuselage that resembled something out of a 2100 science fiction nightmare. A fusion of the old and the future, of what was and what could have been. The propellers and engines were like the noise of trash cans, patched up with tubes and parts that had seemingly been ripped from more sophisticated ships and used as salvation for what remained of the vessel. The kind of ships that were once grand, but now unrecognizable, almost as if time itself had left them behind. The visual was a clear representation of what Mars had become, a place of leftovers, where what was useful remained only because it was functional, not because it was beautiful. Watching from a safe point, I began to observe the behavior of the occupants. They were not trying to hide. On the contrary, they were showing off, as if they knew exactly what they were doing, or more, as if they were too confident to worry about any resistance. A nearly unsettling sight. I watched silently as they landed. The ship made a muffled sound as it touched the barren ground, as if the Martian Earth was receiving an unwelcome visitor. When the ramp opened, 4 figures appeared. They were men and women, all in tattered clothes, blending futuristic metal and neon with the worn style of the past. The aesthetic was definitely post-apocalyptic. Leather jackets, improbable mechanical arms, visible cybernetic implants, and tattoos that seemed to be records of past battles. They were a grotesque vision of survivors, remnants of a society that had lost its way, but still with a certain arrogance in the way they moved. Their clothes were a mixture of military wear and rags from failed civilizations, and their faces were partially covered by makeshift masks, as if they were trying to preserve some aspect of their identity, in a world where everything had already been destroyed. The cybernetic implants in their bodies looked outdated and in some cases somewhat rusty, as if they were makeshift replacement parts from old machines, fused with living flesh. It was a distorted fusion of the past and the future, a degenerated cyberpunk aesthetic. As they approached the base, I could tell they weren't just there to observe the destruction. There was something more in their behavior, something calculated. They were trying to take advantage of the desolate situation we were in. The human base was an easy target, and this was more of an opportunity for plunder than anything else. One of the pirates, taller and with a large scar crossing his face, spoke loudly. "This place, everything's below, right? Should be easy to steal, huh?" His hoarse voice sounded like he was making light of the situation, but at the same time there was a tone of caution, as if he knew he was taking a risk. The woman next to him, a shorter and more agile figure with platinum hair and a worn leather jacket, looked around with a disdainful expression. It's been a while since the Earth Empire forgot about Mars. If they think they're safe here, they're more lost than they imagine. I stayed in the shadows, watching them as they began to scavenge the area. Their behavior was clear. They were hunting for something valuable, and from the way they moved, it was evident they knew exactly what they were looking for. I didn't know yet what it was, but one thing was clear. They weren't there for any simple treasure. They were looking for something valuable, and they had found the monolith. From where I stood, I could see that the pirate ship didn't have the capacity for a large heist. That meant they were probably interested in something small, but of great value, something that could be easily transported, the monolith of Ra. It had left this imposing object with ancient technology to help us rebuild our base, but I had failed to learn how to control the device. I cautiously approached, trying to maintain my distance while watching the pirates. They were close enough that I could hear their whispers and feel that they were determined to take something. The leader, the scarred man, seemed to be the most calculating. "We found what we wanted, guys," he shouted to the others, excitement palpable in his voice. "We're going to make our fortune with this." It was then that I realized, in the corner of the room where the monolith had been stored, it was gone. What remained was only a mark on the surface where it had once rested. With a growing sense of terror, I understood that this was what they wanted, the monolith, and now it was no longer there. The pirates, as if they knew what I had just discovered, began to retreat quickly to their ship, without any resistance. It was as if they were fulfilling a mission, and the plunder was just part of it. They disappeared into their patched-up ship, which moved away from the human base with the same carefree appearance with which they had arrived. I moved closer to where the monolith had been, trying to understand what had happened. The monolith had been taken, and something bigger was now in motion. That's when something, on the horizon, caught my attention. The pirate ship was already on its way, but in the Martian sky, a massive distortion began to take shape. A colossal structure rose, something that shouldn't have been possible. It wasn't just a ship. The structure, as large as a moon, was black and blue, with the elongated shape of a warship. The atmosphere around it seemed to warp, making space and time themselves curve in an anomalous way. The gravity of Mars, already weak to begin with, seemed to shift as the ship floated, as if its presence was destabilizing the planet. I knew that nothing would be the same again. The ship wasn't leaving. On the contrary, it was stopped there, hovering around Mars, as if it were observing, waiting. Something was about to happen, and the mere presence of that thing was enough to leave me speechless. The feeling of helplessness overwhelmed me entirely. I had faced immense horrors before, but never something like that. The monolith of Ra, the pirates, it all seemed like part of something larger, something unfolding right before my eyes, and I wasn't sure if I was prepared for what would come next. I knew, with terrifying certainty, that the future of Mars and perhaps of all humanity was in the hands of that colossal ship. But what was it really? A threat? A new phase of the game? My mind clung to the one phrase that was forming in my thoughts. The war that would never end has begun now. And as the ship remained still, I felt Mars' gravity grow even more unstable. Something within me, a deep and uncontrollable sensation, told me that the worst was only just beginning. Remember, this is just my diary. If you found this, it's probably already too late. Do you think humanity is limited to its small planet, that the cosmos is empty and silent? Think again. 3 organizations conduct secret research on Mars: Gigantia, with its aqua-green pyramid, Red Dragon, with its red dragon paw, and we, the Purple Lagoon, with the purple vortex, a portal to the unknown. We seek something beyond the boundaries of human science, in a land now inhabited by immortal creatures that challenge our understanding of time and space. During an expedition, we touched what we shouldn't have. We found a buried pyramid and unleashed Horus, an ancient being. But our discovery attracted the wrath of Anubis, a cosmic being of chaos and destruction. Horus revealed that Anubis was the embodiment of chaos, and his sister Ra appeared to help us, but with plans darker than we had imagined. She didn't just want to destroy Anubis, she also intended to alter humanity's fate, promising a techno-biological evolution that would turn us into something beyond human. Before leaving with Horus, Ra gave us a monolith, a quantum artifact capable of altering reality. But it was stolen, not by cosmic beings, but by space pirates who didn't understand the power they carried. The monolith disappeared, and a new threat emerged. Something colossal is coming to Mars. They are not pirates or conquerors. Its magnitude warps space and time, an immense ship making everything else seem insignificant. Now I, a simple man, find myself between humanity and these unknown forces. I've been placed here to decide the future of our species, but every day I wonder, how far should I go? Horus, Ra, Anubis, maybe it was all just a piece of a bigger plan I can't comprehend. This new presence in Mars' sky might be our salvation or our damnation. I don't know anymore. The cosmic war we never imagined is just beginning. The sky of Mars, tinged with the planet's eternal red, was dominated by something beyond comprehension. A colossal ship, larger than any human structure, tore through the sky with a presence that made the ground beneath our feet tremble. There were no sounds of engines, only a deep murmur, almost like a chant reverberating through the fabric of space. In the face of that manifestation, I felt smaller than ever. I thought of humanity's achievements: rockets, space stations, bases on Mars. All seemed insignificant now. That presence didn't need force to show our smallness. And I, the scientist, the decoder of cosmic enigmas, could only think of how fragile I was in that moment. If it wanted to destroy us, it would have done so already, Gray murmured beside me, his posture as rigid as always, but there was tension in his voice. Even he, the soldier trained for any scenario, couldn't completely hide the weight of that presence. I nodded slightly but said nothing. There was nothing to say. There was nothing to do but wait. The ship settled on the horizon, its monumental shape obscuring the Martian sun. Its surface was black like space, but with blue details pulsating like veins of living energy. It didn't seem built, but born, something alive and incomprehensible. The silence that followed was deafening. Gray adjusted his weapon, knowing it was useless, while I fought to control my breath. My hands were cold inside the gloves, and a light sweat began to form on my brow. I tried to hide my unease, but I knew I wouldn't fool anyone, especially General Gray. He descended, the cosmic being, an incomprehensible presence, an entity whose stories resided in the oldest myths of humanity and the cosmos. He did not walk, he advanced as if space itself bent beneath his feet. His attire, or perhaps his very skin, was adorned with golden and bluish details, like a cosmos encapsulated in a body. His face was a mask of royalty, with eyes that shone like dying stars, carrying the weight of millennia of existence. His height was imposing, about 3 meters, enough to make us look up, yet not grotesque. There was harmony in his form, a perfection only a superior being could possess. In one hand he held something resembling a scepter, but it pulsed with incomprehensible energy, as if each movement could alter the very flow of the universe. When he stopped before us, I felt something beyond fear. It was an overwhelming weight, a consciousness that exposed all my thoughts, insecurities, and doubts, like an open book. There was no place to hide. I looked at Gray, whose posture remained rigid, but I could see in his eyes that he felt the same. The cosmic being watched us in silence for a few seconds that felt like eternity. Then he spoke. His voice, deep as thunder yet carrying the weight of past eras, fallen empires, and decisions that shaped entire galaxies. Each word didn't just echo in our ears, but within me, as though it spoke directly to the essence of who I was. "You two represent your species well," he said. Surprisingly, his voice sounded understandable in our minds, echoing in the Martian silence. He looked at Gray, a warrior, always alert, always ready to fight or flee. Then he turned to me, and I felt his attention like a beacon that illuminated me completely. "And you, a doctor, a man of science, of progress, just like my sister." My body froze. He was speaking of Ra, but before I could say anything, he continued, "You are just a piece in her game. Her goals are the same as they were in past eras, and she surely hasn't revealed everything to you." My mind spun. He was right. There had always been something about Ra I couldn't fully understand, something she kept hidden from me. But then, driven by a sudden rage, perhaps because of the cosmic being's attempt to manipulate me, perhaps by the desperation to maintain my sanity in that moment, I retorted, "If you're saying that, why should I believe you?" The cosmic being tilted his head slightly, as if my response were a curious animal, worthy of attention for a brief moment. "She told you she would evolve your humanity, didn't she?" he asked, and I couldn't hide my surprise. "How do you know?" I murmured, my voice weak. "I know her plans. You don't have to believe me, but one thing is certain. I have no interest in your tiny world. We've ruled there once. My interest is something much greater." I wanted to ask if he could promise not to touch humanity, but the question died before it reached my lips. What would be the value of a promise from such an ancient being? To him, words were mere tools, winds shaped by his will. I knew asking for his word would be as futile as trying to hold back a storm with bare hands. The cosmic being watched us again, this time with a more lingering gaze. First Gray, with his upright and combative posture, then me, whose synapses seemed to spark like fireflies in my mind. He smiled, or something close to it. "You are a warrior," he said, pointing at Gray. "I can tell by your posture." Then he turned to me. "And you, Abyss, are what they call a doctor, a man of science, of progress, just like my sister. And you know that for those who venture into the field of science, some choices are irreversible." His words were like a blade cutting through what remained of my defenses. He was right. There had always been something in me that ignored limits in the name of discovery, something I tried to suppress, but that still existed. And in that moment, I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew more about me than I did myself. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice almost imperceptible against the vastness that stretched before us. "My name is Osiris," he answered, and for the first time I noticed something human in his speech. There was a humility in his words, a tone that, though imposing, didn't carry the arrogance of the cosmic gods I had once known. He stood before me, but he didn't seem to wish to impose himself, as if his very existence were a reality that needed no defense. "My siblings Horus and Ra, those who remain, are out there," he continued, with a slight gesture of his hand that seemed to reach beyond the horizon. "They walk with a power they never imagined, naively. They don't know what they are about to unleash." I stayed silent for a moment. The weight of his words seemed to resonate in the air, and a tension I couldn't measure spread through every atom around us. "Then you know Anubis?" I asked, my voice trying to escape a mix of apprehension and curiosity. The mere thought of invoking the name of that Egyptian god, always associated with the end and the beyond, gave me a strange sense of alertness. Osiris's expression changed. A faint shadow crossed his face, and his eyes, once bright like dying stars, now seemed focused on nothing, fixed on something only he could see. He glanced around, and suddenly the landscape, which had seemed inert until then, took on a new meaning. The destroyed base, the remnants of the zombies, everything now carried the imprint of an older memory. Osiris' eyes gleamed, and his voice echoed with a calmness that was almost unsettling. "The dogs of Anubis," he murmured, as if recalling something distant, something only he could understand. "Their remains are familiar." He slowly turned to face me, his gaze piercing, as if he could see more than just the space around us. "We will have a common enemy, Dr. Abyss." He stepped forward, and his presence seemed to expand, invading every corner of my mind. "You had contact with the monolith, didn't you?" His voice seemed to vibrate in my cells. "You felt what it is, what it can do. Now, you have a choice," he said firmly, continuing. "You will come to my ship, help my servants track the monolith, or you will watch this planet be destroyed." The question was clear, objective, like an ultimatum. Something told me the consequences of this choice would not be limited to Mars, not even to my own existence. The tension in the atmosphere was palpable. I knew that any decision could trigger a reaction that might alter the course of everything. But at the same time, I felt as though, in some way, I no longer had control over what was happening around me. The fate of Mars, humanity, perhaps even my own fate, was now intertwined with that cosmic being and the mystery of the monolith. His voice reverberated through space, and for a moment I felt the gravity of his words, as if the fate of humanity was in my hands. I knew time was running out, that I could no longer escape this situation. But then something inside me ignited, a spark of desperation, and at the same time, a strategy I hadn't planned. The only chance of survival was if I could bring others with me. Whatever was coming, I couldn't face it alone. If there was anything to be done, I would need allies. There were no more ships, no technology to rebuild, and no way to communicate with Earth. The only option was to risk everything. I looked at Gray, who seemed to be calculating every move like an experienced warrior, but I could also see that he was beginning to understand that there was no way out for us anymore. But something still burned in me, one last desperate play. "I'll go," I said, my voice firmer than I felt, but with one condition. Osiris slightly inclined his head, a gesture of curiosity. His eyes, vast as the cosmos, were attentive to every word. "Speak, Doctor," his voice echoed, still calm, but with a hint of challenge. "Take with me the survivors from Red Dragon, Gigantia, and Purple Lagoon," I said quickly, knowing he would understand the weight of my proposal. "All of them. I won't go forward alone. If you want my help, you'll have to accept this." I knew it was a risky bet. As someone of my caliber, a scientist with so much knowledge of what was at stake, I should never make such a demand. But it was the only chance to gain something I still didn't fully understand. If survival depended on collaborating with Osiris, I would do so, but not without a price. "Do you dare make a demand, Doctor?" His voice was deep, like distant thunder. "You ask not only to save yourself, but to bring everyone with you, to who knows where." I knew he was aware of the magnitude of my proposal, but there was no time to ponder. I had made my choice, and I knew that the answer he gave me now might be the only chance to escape the impending destruction. "Yes," I said, feeling the crushing pressure increase. "If you're going to help me, you'll have to help them all, and in return I'll do whatever it takes to help with whatever you need, but not alone." For a moment, reality seemed to distort, as if time itself hesitated, waiting for the final decision of a being beyond human comprehension. Then finally, Osiris spoke. "You risk much, Dr. Abyss, but I accept your condition." I felt my body relax for a brief moment. Something had changed, and the future now became a field of possibilities. I didn't know what awaited me, nor what lay behind Osiris's proposal, but one way or another, we would be in this together. With a subtle gesture, he raised his hand, and a massive wave of energy began to emanate from the ship. The survivors from the three organizations, Red Dragon, Gigantia, and Purple Lagoon, who were scattered and disorganized, be enveloped by a golden and bluish light, as if an invisible force field had grabbed them, uniting them with us. Now Osiris said, his voice grave and deep, "You will come with me. But remember, Doctor, as you said, whatever comes, you will be under my protection or under my punishment." The feeling of displacement was instantaneous, a sensation of being pulled into the unknown, as if reality were twisting around us, and I knew there would be no turning back. And at that moment, the sky of Mars, the monolith, and the threats of destruction were left behind, becoming mere shadows of an uncertain future. What would come next, I didn't know. But one thing was certain, this was the only chance to survive. And perhaps it would be the last opportunity to uncover what was truly at stake. Then the void swallowed us. And the story would continue, but now, the real fight was about to begin. Upon entering Osiris's ship, the first impression is that of a living empire, a colossal organism, a structure that seems to pulse and vibrate as if every wall were a vital organ. The ship isn't just a machine. It is a complex being, a fusion of biotechnology and engineering in a way that surpasses anything I've ever seen. Looking around, it's impossible not to feel the grandeur of its presence, as though we are inside a city that wasn't built but born. Walking through the corridors, the sensation is one of endless space. The ship is immense, so colossal that even footsteps seem to vanish into the void. The corridors are labyrinthine, as if the architecture itself were designed to confuse, to disorient anyone who dares enter. Black and blue walls dominate the surroundings, with metallic surfaces sculpted by soft pulses of light, as though something were breathing in a steady rhythm. The vibrant blue, intense and luminous, flows like an energy current through the ship's core, resembling an electric thread running through the fabric of this living empire. Between the walls, techno-biological beings, almost indistinguishable from machines, move fluidly. Hundreds of thousands of servants, hybrid creatures combining flesh and metal, work tirelessly to keep the ship operational. They meld seamlessly with gears and circuits, manipulating components in an almost organic manner, extensions of the ship itself. Their bodies, equipped with bionic tentacles, extend and retract as they perform intricate, seemingly endless tasks. They are so numerous that their movement feels choreographed, like an unceasing technological dance. The ship is divided into distinct zones, each with its own classes and functions. Levels of labor and social stratification that follow no human logic, but rather a hierarchy imposed by the nature of the space itself. There are industrial areas, command zones, artificial intelligence halls, and also spaces where the concept of life, or what can be called life, blends with machines. In certain areas, I see hybrid creatures that are both mechanical and biological, fusions of flesh and metal, with glowing eyes that watch every move, as though actively monitoring the journey of anyone who dares to tread these passages. The workers, many of whom come from various organizations, seem lost in their routines, their bodies exhausted, their minds saturated by the ship's vastness and its immutable functions. Some are human, others, something beyond that. Servants of the ship, their bodies modified with metallic parts fused to their skin, performing tasks without question, without rest. And all this takes place under a dark sky, as if the ship itself were immersed in a stellar ocean. The sound of the environment is muffled, like a distant echo, with the whisper of machines, the hum of flowing energy, and the occasional metallic sigh, as if the ship were alive, in some kind of synchrony with its occupants. The walk through the corridors seems never-ending. Each passage leads to a new dimension within the ship, new levels, new environments. At times we see factories in full operation with incomprehensible engines and devices. At others there are battle halls where servants prepare for some event, some type of confrontation or trial. Here life pulses in its most varied and unexpected forms, a chaotic order that creates a symbiosis among all the ship's elements. There are moments of crushing stillness, followed by frenzied activity, as though the ship itself, this living being, breathes between calm and agitation. And always, above all, looms the sensation of absolute dominion. There is no escape, no control, only the presence of Osiris, his distant and unyielding authority hovering over every aspect of this vast living city that is the ship. As I pass through all these sections, the last survivors of the Purple Lagoon, Red Dragon, and even Gigantia mingle with Osiris's crew, Everyone here has a purpose, and everyone in their own way knows that the ship is alive. Not just the ship, everyone aboard it. The room is dark, illuminated by a cold, flickering light that pulses from the walls, as if the ship itself were breathing. The air is heavy with the smell of metal and something organic, an unbearable mixture, as though we were inside a biotech lab left unventilated for decades. I try to remain impassive, but the discomfort is palpable. It's not the environment, but the fact of being surrounded by beings who no longer know the boundaries between the biological and the mechanical. The scientists are gathered around a vast control panel, their hands and bodies connected to wires and implants. Some of them, almost entirely cybernetic, control the ship's operations with fluid gestures, their expressions blank but intensely focused. Others still have patches of skin, but it's clear they are no longer human in the simplest sense of the word. They are the reflection of an unrelenting pursuit of transcendence, of something beyond death. They don't need words to communicate. Gestures and signals suffice. And now they seem to be in trouble. One of the scientists, a tall woman with skin covered in golden implants, frowns as she works on a panel. Her fingers dance across the screen, but something is wrong. She slides her fingers downward, and the screen flickers. The others watch her, the tension between them rising. "It's happening again," she murmurs, her voice sharp. "The connection between the quantum flows is failing. We can't stabilize the matter. The organic structure of the module is disintegrating." The air thickens, and I feel like an observer on the fringes of an experience that isn't mine. But then I see it. The fault. A small error in the quantum energy flow, a subtle dissonance between the energy fields and the biotech organs the scientists are trying to manipulate. The woman tries to adjust it again, but the circuits around her begin to crackle, and the ship, this living entity, emits a low noise, almost like a groan. The other scientists pull back, sensing the imminent failure. I observe in silence, the data quickly crossing my mind. It's not that complex. The problem is simple, but the implications of this minor failure could be catastrophic if not corrected. A misalignment between the energy fields and the organic biotechnology. A divergence that is causing the system to reject the organism, as if trying to expel it. They're looking at me now, waiting. I don't know for how long. Perhaps a minute, perhaps more. They're wondering what I would do, and that's when I realize they have no idea what's happening. Not because they're incapable, but because they've lost the ability to view the problem from a fresh perspective. They're so entangled in the complexity of their own creation that they can no longer see the obvious. I finally say the problem lies in the field modulation. The quantum flow is misaligned with the organic. If you don't correct the interference now, the matter will keep disintegrating. You need to recalibrate the organic frequency, not the biotech system's frequency. You're trying to adjust what isn't the problem. They look at me, and frustration is clear in their eyes. It's not that they don't believe me, it's that they're used to having control over everything, and a suggestion like this comes from a stranger, a man who has just arrived. But slowly, one of them approaches the control panel, the man with mechanical eyes, and begins reconfiguring the parameters. The atmosphere becomes tense, the ship seeming to wait in silence. The scientists, now wordless, work in unison, adjusting the modules as I watch, my gaze fixed on their every movement. I know they're trying to prove themselves, searching for the right answer, but the answer doesn't come from what they try to control. It comes from what they've lost over time, the ability to listen, to feel the problem, instead of just calculating it. Finally, the screen shines with an intense light and the data stabilizes. The energy currents flow in harmony, the biotech module adjusts, and the ship, as if breathing more easily, emits a deep, satisfied sound. The problem is solved. They say nothing. There's no need. The solution, as simple as it was, reveals a deeper truth for all of us. I am no longer a stranger. They know that, even as a human, I may have more in common with this ship than they imagined. The golden-skinned woman finally turns to me, her eyes now sharper, as if truly seeing me for who I am. She makes a subtle motion with her head, perhaps in acceptance or recognition. "Good work," she says, her voice lower but with a hint of respect that wasn't there before. I don't respond. There's no need. The environment around us, the ship, envelops us in silence. This place, more than any other, has already taught me that sometimes words don't matter. What truly matters is what we're able to perceive beyond them. The tension inside the science room grew with every passing second. I, Dr. Abyss, was still absorbing the details of that immense ship, feeling the vibrations of the biological technology that permeated it, while the scientists continued to watch me, suspicious, as if I were an anomaly. However, deep down, a sense of unease began to take over me. Something was wrong. Suddenly, the walls of the ship trembled. The floor, covered in a dark material, as if it were flesh, vibrated with an intensity that made the lights flicker. The sound of a distant rumble echoed, and I felt the pressure of the ship change, as if it were being pushed away. That wasn't the sound of a system failure. It was something much worse. "Watch out!" shouted one of the scientists, pointing to a control panel. His voice was filled with panic. The screens began to show red alerts. I immediately stood up, trying to understand what was happening. It didn't take long before the image of another colossal ship filled the screens in the room. A dark silhouette, in a deep blue and black tone, appeared in the distance, approaching with a supernatural speed. The structure seemed alive, pulsing with shapes extending like tentacles, and the ship seemed to literally devour the light around it, as if moving through a tear in space-time. "Impossible," I murmured. "This ship shouldn't exist." It was a ship of unimaginable proportions, with a fluid shape, constantly shifting as it drew nearer. It wasn't a conventional ship. It was something else. Something primal, organic, with an energy I had never felt before. The essence of its presence seemed to corrode the very reality around it. I turned to Osiris, who was there, motionless, watching with a grim look. His expression was hard to read, but a shadow seemed to pass through his eyes. I realized for the first time that he wasn't surprised. He knew what was happening. Osiris's ship began to move, but not quickly, as if it had been hit by something that was beginning to affect it physically. Osiris' colossal ship pulsed, as if an external force was trapping it. A deathly silence filled the room, as I watched the screens, trying to understand what was happening. "Activate defense protocols," Osiris ordered in his deep voice, but I could tell there was something more in his tone. He was tense. There was no desperation, but a feeling of inevitability hung in the air. That's when the enemy ship fired. A beam of dark, dense, and pulsing light cut through the space between the two ships, hitting the side of Osiris's ship with overwhelming force. Osiris's ship shook violently, and a wave of energy swept through the room. I nearly crashed to the floor, but managed to steady myself. Outside, all I could see was a war scene starting to unfold. The two ships were so large that the battle seemed something the cosmos itself would witness, a confrontation between titans where reality twisted and broke. "They're here!" shouted one of the scientists, terrified. But no one seemed to understand what was happening until an electronic warning cut through the silence. "Hostile ship detected, unknown identity, emerging threat." The enemy ship wasn't just a war vehicle. It was a creature, a manifestation of something that existed beyond the limits of known space. Its structure seemed to pulse, vibrate with alien energy, as if space-time itself were being manipulated to allow its entry into reality. Osiris's ship shook again, this time with an intensity that felt almost visceral. The walls pulsed, and a growing sense of pressure filled the room. I stood up, my eyes fixed on the screens, trying to process what was happening. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. The sound of a deep rumble reverberated through the entire ship, followed by a dark glow cutting through the void of space ahead of us. The image on the screen changed quickly. A new colossal ship appeared, emerging from the darkness of the cosmos. It was an ancient enemy, a presence that made my skin crawl. The ship looked alive, a monstrous creation of pure metal and biological matter, with tentacles stretching into space, as if it wanted to devour the very reality around it. Its shape was so alien and colossal that even Osiris's immense empire seemed small in comparison. I watched speechless as what appeared to be a new force emerged from the cosmic abyss, and my mind raced for answers. Why were they here? What did they want? The answer came in an instant: the monolith. They were after it. Track the monolith! Osiris's voice cut through the silence, deep and authoritative. He wasn't surprised, not even panicked. His posture was firm, confident, as if he had faced such threats before. But I knew something was about to change. The scientists, still stunned, were in a state of panic. They couldn't process the magnitude of what was happening. Osiris turned to me, his eyes as deep as an abyss. "Dr. Abyss, help the scientists," he ordered. "We need to find the monolith now." With precise command, Osiris moved quickly toward the command post. He was a warrior, not just a ruler, and he was ready for action. I knew that the great cosmic war, the one he had probably anticipated for millennia, was about to begin. As he left, tension filled the room. The ship shook once again, and the sense of imminent destruction was palpable. The sound of servos and soldiers running through the halls was like a whispered warning. The danger was near, but there was something I needed to understand. Something deeper within me was pushing me to act. The monolith, it was more than just a piece of technology or an alien artifact. It was the key. "Dr. Abyss," one of the scientists whispered, his face pale, "can you help us find the monolith?" I looked at him, and for a brief moment everything around me seemed to disappear. The tension, the fear, the chaos. I knew it was my responsibility. I was the key to all of this. It was time to do my part. We ran through the ship's corridors, the biotechnological structure around us pulsing with life. Every step was a battle against time. Outside, Mars's sky was now darkened by a massive shadow. The enemy ship was approaching at a terrifying speed. At the command post, Osiris was already in position, commanding with firm hands. He looked at me only once, and his gaze was enough for me to know that this battle would begin now, not just for survival, but for something much deeper. The monolith had to be found, and I knew its power wasn't just in its material, but in what it represented. The enemy ship fired once again, and the sound of its weapon colliding with Osiris's ship reverberated through space. The confrontation was about to reach its peak. But something inside me, something deep and ancient, told me that this battle wouldn't just be about destruction. The monolith was the center of it all, and it was closer to me than ever. The great cosmic war had begun, and at that moment, everything was about to change forever.